Combat sports is filled with some of the greatest rivalries known to man or woman, let's be honest. And there's nothing better than seeing fighters repeatedly go against one another because each time out, they learn something new. So today, I'm going to take you through some of the best trilogies that ever happened in the UFC or in mixed martial arts. And this video was actually inspired by next weekend, UFC 283 going down in Brazil. We've got Deiveson Figueiredo going up against Brandon Moreno for the fourth time. That is a quadrilogy. Yes, quadrilogy. Real word. I wasn't sure if it was a real word or not. I had to double check that one, but quadrilogy is a real word and they are sharing the octagon for a fourth time. So that's mental. I mean, think of the data and the analysis and the feedback that they know about one another. And that fourth fight is going to come down to who has learned the most about each other better than the other one, if that makes sense. Depending on whether you include trilogies that include fights outside of the UFC or even outside of MMA, like Alex Pereira's trilogy with Israel Adesanya, there has been, if you do include outside the UFC, Pride, Strikeforce, kickboxing, there has been roughly 30 trilogies in the UFC. But don't worry, we're not going to go through 30. We're going to go through some of the biggest ones. And the interesting thing about trilogies is that the winner of the second fight usually wins the third fight. In fact, 75% of the time that happens. So anyway, enough me waffling on. Let's get into it. Here are some of the biggest trilogies. So, come on, we're going to start with this. Tito Ortiz versus Ken Shamrock. The Huntington Beach bad boy versus the world's most dangerous man. 3-0 for Tito Ortiz, for the bad boy. They first went down at UFC 40, November 2002, and Tito Ortiz got the job done via TKO in round 3. I mean, he turned his face into a hamburger. That's what he said. He took him down repeatedly, elbowed the hell out of him. And incidentally, that was one of the first UFC fights I ever watched because in 2002, that was when I started my path to become a fighter and I was downloading and watching as many fights as I could. And that was one of the main ones. But of course, these guys were tied together throughout history. They both coached season 3 of The Ultimate Fighter, which featured some young Brit that no Americans had ever seen before. He went on to win the whole thing and become a bit of a loudmouth, cocky son of a gun. Of course, I'm talking about me. Tito, that was my coach. Ken Shamrock was the other coach. And of course, at the end of The Ultimate Fighter, they go up against one another. And listen, it wasn't much of a fight. That one ended very, very quick. It was a big slam from Tito Ortiz. Got the job done in round 1. Wasn't even a fight. So because that ended so quickly in 2006, July, they thought, listen, we've got to give the fans what they want to see. So they let them have another crack at the whip. They let old Ken have another go. And that's no disrespect to Ken, by the way. So they rescheduled it for the third time, October 2006. And once again, Tito Ortiz was victorious. Now, what is the significance of that trilogy? Well, it was the first trilogy to end in a 3-0 sweep. The first fight was the first genuinely big pay-per-view for the UFC in the modern era. UFC 40 was a breakout event. Tito Ortiz was a huge star and one of the biggest faces of the company. And the third fight, well, that was on Spike TV. Okay. And that cemented the UFC on cable television in America as a massive draw. All right, the next one features the prodigy, BJ Penn, an absolute legend of the sport, going up against another legend, a man that doesn't need a nickname, Matt Hughes. Now listen, these two did not like each other. They were rivals. They hated one another, but now they've actually become pretty good friends, which is beautiful to see. Now, it was a trilogy. As I say, this whole video is about trilogies. What am I doing? And BJ Penn was the victor. He won it 2-1. The first one went down at UFC 46, January 2004, and BJ Penn got the job done pretty quick. But of course, Matt Hughes, the man's an absolute legend, a long-time welterweight champion. So of course, BJ Penn and Matt Hughes, they would meet again. And this time it was at the Honda Center in Anaheim, California. It was the main event. These two went toe-to-toe and Matt Hughes won this time. He got a third round TKO. And if you remember, because I was there, that was the second UFC event I ever went to. After that fight, George St. Pierre came into the octagon, and that is when he dropped that famous line, "I am not impressed by your performance." So, of course, they were 1-1. 1-1 coming into the third match. Both men very, very confident. But this time, BJ Penn man, did he drive the nail into the coffin, drive his fist into the face, got the job done really quick. First round knockout, 21 seconds, double jab, right hand, bish, bash, bosh. That was it. That's all she wrote. The trilogy was done. The rivalry was over, and BJ Penn was the winner. Now, the significance of that one, BJ Penn got the job done in 21 seconds in the final fight of the most conclusive rubber match of any trilogy. And as I said before, these two went on to become very, very close friends. And if you know the state of mixed martial arts, Matt Hughes was involved in a terrible accident and fighting back still to full health. So Matt Hughes, legend of the game, big shout out to him. Hope you well if you see this, brother. All right, sticking with the Ultimate Fighter theme, Forrest Griffin, season 1 winner, the original Ultimate Fighter, going up against Tito Ortiz, once again, who coached season 3. These two went up against one another. And it was Forrest Griffin who would win the trilogy. In UFC 59, April 2006, Tito Ortiz would win a split decision. And I was at that fight as well. I just won season 3. They flew us out to do some press. I was sitting there in the crowd. It was unbelievable. I was like a kid in a candy store. Couldn't believe that soon I would be fighting in that octagon. But still, as I say, Tito Ortiz got the job done. Forrest Griffin was still a rookie, but he was learning. He was getting better. And they rematched again at UFC 106, November 2009. And this time, Forrest Griffin managed to outwork him and he won the fight via a split decision. And of course, anytime it is 1-1, there's going to be the third, like I said. So they would meet for a third and a final time. And when I say final, I mean final for both of them, because it went down UFC 148, July 2012. And Forrest Griffin went out there. He won the fight by a unanimous decision. Okay. But he wasn't convinced that he'd won. So when the fight finished, he jumped out the octagon and just sprinted back to his locker room. He wasn't happy with his performance. He was kind of pissed off. They had to go and get him, drag him back into the cage and announce him as the winner. And Dana was a little bit annoyed at him. And then Tito Ortiz, I think he retired in the octagon, but Forrest took the mic off him and things like that. But still, for both of those guys, that was the last time you would see either of them fight ever again in the octagon. After that fight, Forrest Griffin was having health problems, couldn't really get through a training camp, and Tito Ortiz went off fighting elsewhere. All right, the next one, the big man, the demolition man, the dream, the Alistair Overeem, going up against the guy that makes that weird face, Fabrizio Verdum. Former champion. Overeem won this series 2-1. Verdum, one of the biggest guys, great jiu-jitsu, good striking, pretty unorthodox in everything that he does. And as I say, a funny guy, and he pulled that face quite a bit, and likes to throw boomerangs at Colby Covington in Australia. Anyway, these guys met in various different promotions. The first one was back in the legendary Pride FC. Man, I miss Pride. This one was in May 2006, and Verdum, being the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, that was his signature. He was known for his Jiu-Jitsu. He got this done. Round 2, got the Kimura, but they would meet again, this time in Strikeforce, also a legendary promotion. Some amazing fights took place there. This one went down in June 2011, and Overeem, being the world-class kickboxer and the striker that he is, he got the job done, but he won it on points by decision. And of course, this time, come on, Strikeforce, Pride, might as well do the third one in the UFC, and that is what they did. UFC 213, July 2017, and Overeem once again got the job done on points. And what is the significance of that one? Well, it is the only trilogy to take place throughout all 3 of the world's biggest MMA promotions. Pride, Strikeforce, UFC, and the UFC owned them all eventually as well. So that really put a bed to all of those rivalries. All right, moving on now to one of the biggest trilogies the UFC ever saw, and definitely the most recent, and featuring 2 of the biggest stars the UFC currently has. And one of them, Conor McGregor, the notorious one, the biggest star the company has ever seen. Now, he went up against Dustin the Diamond Poirier, 2014, UFC 178. Conor was on this meteoric rise, knocking everybody out. In his 4th fight, went up against Dustin Poirier, was deemed as a step up in competition, but it certainly didn't look like that, because Conor went out there and destroyed him, just like he was doing everyone else. And he went off, he became this big superstar, knocked everyone out, became a 2-weight division champion, boxed Floyd Mayweather, and became an absolute bazillionaire. The man's loaded. God bless him for that. Now, of course, come on. Listen, in that meantime, in that hiatus, that time away to losing to Khabib, whatever, Dustin Diamond, come on, he became a big star himself. He became an interim champion. Of course, he lost to Khabib, but still became a big draw. So these two were destined to meet once again. And of course, they did. And that went down January 2021, Abu Dhabi, Fight Island. And this time, Dustin got revenge, and in a big way. This time when they went out there, Conor McGregor came out very aggressive once again because, of course, he'd knocked him out before, so he believed that he could. But much like the Nate Diaz fight, he didn't monitor his energy levels correctly, or something like that is what he said. Anyway, he had a good opening half of round one, but then Dustin started coming back at the end of round two, chopping down the leg kicks, blocking a lot of shots, hanging round in the pocket. A very, very compelling and exciting opening round. Round two, though, was all Dustin the Diamond. He went out there, he wanted revenge, and he certainly got it, and he left Conor McGregor laid on his back, unconscious. Now, a lot of people argue with me when I say that, but the reality is he was out just for a quick flash knockout, but he came back around pretty quickly. But of course, that was nice guy McGregor. You know, he was being so cordial and nice and polite to everybody. Well, when the third and final fight went down, there was no more Mr. Nice Guy. UFC 264, July 2021. Conor was talking smack to everyone. Everyone was getting it. He was mad. He was angry. He was saying,
Dustin's going out on a stretcher. That's my prediction.
Even Stephen A. Smith was getting it. He was not a happy man, okay? He was out for revenge. He was angry. He felt like he'd been humiliated because he's a very, very proud man. That's what makes fighters great. We pride ourselves on our fighting ability. But, of course, Dustin's no slouch. He went on to become an interim champion as well. He's one of the best to ever do it. And, of course, this time got the job done. TKO, round one. But, as we know, it ended in the leg break, the leg snap. Conor didn't take a nap, the leg broke. It was a very, very dominant opening first round though for Dustin Poirier. Beat him to the punch, beat him to the clinch, took him down, ground and pounded the hell out of him. At the end of the round, Conor got back up, Dustin was unloading, and then he went down. And it looked like Dustin might have knocked him out, but then when it was on replays and stuff, you could see the leg break. It was actually disgusting, and Conor has yet to return. Now, the significance of that fight, well, it was the highest grossing UFC trilogy ever. Of course, come on, Conor was involved. And will this be the second quadrilogy ever? You know, will it happen later this year? When Conor returns, will that be the fight? Who knows? But still, this brings us now to our final one of all the trilogies, the significant trilogies. I'm talking about the heavyweights, the big boys, Stipe Miocic, the greatest heavyweight, the most title defenses of any heavyweight that we've ever seen in the history of the organization. And he went up against DC, the former light heavyweight champion. He stepped up to heavyweight and he shocked the world. UFC 226, Daniel Cormier knocked out the heavyweight champ in round one. They were engaged in a clinch. DC broke away a little bit. Boom, big right hook, shocked the world, shocked Stipe, put him to sleep. I mean, what a moment for Daniel Cormier. I was so happy for him. Stipe, what a great guy. You got to love that man. So humble, so down to earth. The man works as a fireman. Just a great guy. But to see Daniel Cormier, who's a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, I know him very well, to step up from light heavyweight to heavyweight and become a double champ, I mean, come on. It was amazing. But of course, whenever that happens, there's going to be a rematch. That went down UFC 241, August 2019. I was on holiday in Hawaii. I watched it at a bar, and oh my God, what a sensational fight that was. Back and forth they went. Very, very competitive, but Stipe found the weakness. He was working the body, ripping to the body with a left hook over and over again. That hurt DC, and he kept going to that well. And then, of course, in round four, got the job done, finished him by a KO. And of course, as we know, the trilogy would come. This time, back and forth they went. 5 rounds. They went to a decision. Extremely close fight, but Stipe Miocic got the job done. And what is the significance of that one? Well, it was the biggest heavyweight trilogy in UFC history in terms of pay-per-view buys. So, there it is. If there's any trilogies that I haven't mentioned that you want to see, let me know in the comments. But what do you think of that? What do you think of that? Anyway, that's it. I'm done. I'm out of here. Take it easy. Subscribe and ring the bell if you want to. I'd appreciate it, but you don't have to. But, you know, I've asked you now, so ring the bell. Subscribe. Take it easy.